We'll be joined by a new set of guests, but yes, Professor Andrew Latham joins us. He's a distinguished scholar of international security and strategic studies. We also have Dipanshu Mohan, Professor and Dean of OP Jindal Global University. Dipanshu, coming to you, India is the fastest growing major economy. There is, the fact here is, it's almost like a global investor magnet. And now we are facing a situation of this nature where a great degree of uncertainty is also, looming large. But at the same time, are you sensing that this tariff, which actually kicks in, will be also passing on cost to consumers, or will there be some kind of renegotiations of suppliers?
Okay, thank you for having me here. So I don't think any impact of what we are seeing right now may happen on prices within the Indian market at this point of time. There are certain suppliers, particularly in the textiles and apparel sector. And what you would expect is maybe within, of course, gems, diamond, jewelry. The main segment of India's exports to the US in goods, that is IT and pharma, has been uncovered and untouched by the tariffs. And I think that is where one would have to see how the Trump administration goes ahead with treating India in terms of its extension of what they would consider as secondary sanctions if they want to scope the tariffs out to IT and pharma. That would really affect us big time on the goods segment. I think the main challenge we face is clearly on services, because that's where we export a lot of our segment in the US. Where I think a lot of the conversation is less, I think, discussed is on the capital account side. We have a lot of investment that is pledged into the Indian markets from the US investors. And we must be aware that a lot of the domestic private investment in India across sectors hasn't grown the way the government would have anticipated. And I think we have been too reliant on foreign direct investment. A lot of that has not been adding up. And the US is a big investment market for us. And a lot of the portfolio investment also, as you see, is being driven away. So the volatility in the international market should drive us to do a lot more on the domestic spectrum, is something that I would probably say for a large domestic economy like ours, the size is not of just interest to the external actors, but it is also of a greater interest to our own domestic growth needs. And I think we have to really put a lot of effort in rationalizing the kind of factor market reforms that perhaps we should now target. Because the real issue here, Maria, is about relevance. You can realign with Asian markets, you can realign with Southeast Asian markets, but how relevant you are and how competitive you are is ultimately going to decide how your integration with trade happens. It's a very ruthless calculus, for us to work with. So I think our competitiveness to go up requires a reimagination of our industrial policy. It needs to be a greater focus on middle-income consumers. I've seen a huge squeezing out of middle-income classes, not just within India, but you're seeing that across now in many middle-income markets. So Brazil is a middle-income market. South Africa is a middle-income market. China doesn't allow us the kind of access to markets that we look at. Russia, we have already a very maxed out defense and energy lead tie. So if you're really looking for new markets, it would have to be parts of Africa, again, low middle income. You'll have to look at then parts of Southeast Asia. China is the dominant player there. So how do you stay relevant? You have to do something drastic in your domestic market.
Okay, so when we look at drastic measures, perhaps Siddharth will be able to explain that. But before I go to Siddharth, Professor Latham, this is effectively weaponizing trade. Making tariffs part of geopolitical coercion is the new policy of Trump administration. That's how most analysts and economists are seeing this.
Well, I wouldn't disagree with that. I think Donald Trump gets one thing right. He understands that the post-World War II, post-Cold War Bretton Woods system, rules-based international order, is falling apart. And as in 1945 and as in 1991, he thinks that the United States ought to step up and re-engineer that global order. Unfortunately, his vision is a hub-and-spoke arrangement with the United States always at the center, involved in very favorable bilateral trade relations with India, with China, with Japan, with Canada, with Mexico, et cetera. And there's some logic to that, but it's dysfunctional. It's counterproductive because it's alienating America's good friends and allies, not only in geoeconomic terms, reciprocal tariff barriers and non-tariff barriers and things like that, but also in geopolitical terms. The friendship between India and the United States, which had been growing and which leaders on both sides had been building for the last 20, 25 years, is now, if not in danger, certainly going through a period of turbulence. And we see India rationally pursuing its own national interest, gravitating a little bit more towards Russia in certain respects, mending some fences and rebuilding some bridges with China to some extent, and moving away from the United States, not radically, but in a way that clearly signals that this is a counterproductive kind of approach geopolitically. So I think Trump gets it sort of right. You're right. The language of weaponization, I think, is correct. That resonates with me. He's correct that the old order is dead and the new one is struggling to be born. And as Antonio Gramsci once reminded us, that is a time of monsters.
Okay.
And this is a time of monsters.
Yes, Geeta, the announcement and this kicking in of the new tariffs is coming just few days ahead of that crucial SCO summit, where Prime Minister Modi will be face-to-face with Vladimir Putin and also with Xi Jinping.
Well, that's right. Like most of our experts over here have been saying that all these tariffs and the coercive tactics of Trump administration, Maria, is doing is pushing India to that bloc, the
Yes.
Russia-India-China bloc. We are seeing a revival of RIC like no other. And again, we'll have to wait and see how the meetings pan out in SCO, but this is going to be a very important visit. He's going to Japan, a country, again, that's having a very difficult time with the United States of America, and then going to China, a country that India is meaning to engage even when we have difficulties at the border. Despite that, there is going to be engagement. There is forward movement that the two countries are going to look at and maybe look at a workable and solution to the problems that the two countries have faced. Also, Maria, despite and in spite of all the problems that India and China have had, China has remained one of India's largest trading partners. So that does not go away either. So this is an opportunity for India and China to come together and see how they can best utilize this opportunity to further their interests, regional interests and country interests.
So
and
basically reset
yes,
is
absolutely.
what we are looking at. And do you think it can happen at the SCO given the nature of that summit?
Certainly, because apart from the SCO summit level meetings, there will be enough time for bilaterals, and apart from Pakistan, expect bilaterals between Prime Minister Modi and most other leaders who are going to be there. The crucial ones would be, should there be one, because there are no confirmations or announcements, the crucial ones would be India-China and India-Russia. So these are the two important meetings that we'll be waiting to see, and the outcome of India-China is going to be very important for India and for China, because all the NSA level talks, the foreign minister level meetings, all of them have taken place already. Now we have to see whether they worked it out between themselves to ensure that there's some crucial announcement when the leaders meet, should they meet.
Yes, so Pranay, of course, there has been lots that has happened before this SCO summit. There have been visits by Dr. S. Jaishankar to Moscow. There has been a visit by the Chinese foreign minister to India. So all that, keeping in mind all those developments, what do you think can be the nature of the outcomes if the bilaterals happen between India, China, India, Russia?
Maria, a lot was stuck during during COVID time and post-COVID and Galwan incident, because Prime Minister Narendra Modi would be in China after 7 years. Last he visited,
Yes.
pre-COVID in Wuhan was the informal summit between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Xi Jinping. And after that, Prime Minister would be traveling to China. This is also itself, though he's going for a multilateral thing, but see the trajectory. He's pursuing that look east policy. The possibility lies there. Japan is a very significant and important visit in this, tour of Prime Minister Modi, because as far as the apparel sector is concerned, India is trying to align and India is trying to explore the Japanese market. Japan is a big importer of apparel, though their rules are a bit strict, though their standards are very high. But Indian exporters are now trying to work out with that, and they have been working. And we have Uniqlo and many other Miniso and all many other Japanese brands are there in Indian market, and Indian exporters are now trying to align their products as per the Japanese standards. And a lot of things are also expected from the Prime Minister's Japan visit in terms of the defense, in terms of the bilateral trade, and the East Asia partnership between both these countries. But when Prime Minister travels to Shanghai Cooperation Organization, you have to see that when India became member of SCO in 2017, thereafter
right.
India has actively engaged with SCO with at various platforms where trade, business, economic cooperation remains an important aspect of it, but terrorism is also an important part, an important component of India's SCO negotiation, India's SCO contributions there. And that's the regional anti-terror mechanism is a platform where India has always raised the problem of terrorism. So we have to see that, how all these things, because in SCO, when Pakistan is also there, when other countries are also there, when China is also there, and, how Prime Minister raises that issue, we have to be mindful about these things. We cannot say that just because in reaction of our, difficult relationship with the United States, we are totally drifting away towards China or towards this.
But do
law.
you think then, Siddharth, that India, China, India, Russia will be looking at more points of convergences at this point, given the geopolitical tensions and realignment that we are witnessing?
Where is the option? You saw what happened during Sindoor. Old, tried and tested Russian armaments served us well, including the S-400, may I remind everyone. China, look at our supply side relationship with them. Look at their dominance in sector upon sector, including raw earth minerals or fertilizers, for that example. That's how the trade order, at the urging of the Western nations, primarily the United States, started to develop from the late 80s. Now today, for the US to try and switch it off in one go, that's not going to happen. I just want to bring one more point, Maria, about the absurdity of the US position. And, as a reporter, I would want to stick to facts, but allow me some opinion here. The USTR report a few months ago on foreign trade barriers had a chapter on all countries, including India. I'll just give you two examples of how disconnected from reality is the US and its trade establishment with regard to Indian realities. They say that the MSP is a distorting mechanism and make critical remarks on it. Can you imagine that if the minimum support price regime were to be altered under US pressure, what would be the consequences? I will give only one more example before I hand it back to you. They have a problem with the fact that stents, India, which has one of the highest disease burdens when it comes to obesity, diabetes, and consequently heart attacks, that price caps on stents are not good. Till we didn't have that, stents used to be very expensive. Look at the per capita income in India. What does a government do? Will it not have price caps on stents? Can it allow the price gouging that US companies are known for, the US healthcare system is known for? And now President Trump, literally 24 hours ago, has said that he's going to bring down drug prices in the United States by 1,400, 1,500%. I don't know whether those numbers add up. I'm just trying to, quote him verbatim. On the other hand, he's also saying that many outsiders have taken advantage of our pharma market, so we'll put price caps there also and tariffs. The US president himself is talking about how the US healthcare system has a very negative impact on costs. Yet you are critical of India trying to ensure that stents are available at a reasonable cost. It is, I can go on and on through that report, which will tell the average viewer of how impossible the American demands are. The fact that India engaged for 7 months and has
Yes.
kept its stations is a tribute. A tribute, and I think Indian negotiators should actually get the Nobel Prize for peace in negotiation.
That's actually very well put here, Siddharth. You know, as I've been using that word, it has been extremely measured, great degree of caution that has been exercised by India despite repeated provocation that has been coming in from the United States and right from the top, right from President Donald Trump himself, who went on to say that Indian economy is a dead economy. I'm going to come to Dipanshu and Professor Latham in just a bit, but before that, let's listen in to what Navtej Sarna, former Indian ambassador to the United States, told Rajdeep Sardesai earlier today.
Navtej Sarna, there's the challenge diplomatically. You've got all that feel-good factor, up ki bar, Trump Sarkar, howdy Modi, all of that seems now way in the past. Do you believe that this relationship is now floundering at the moment, a 25-year-old relationship in which a number of people have invested? Is there a serious trust deficit, or is this a temporary blip in your view?
Thank you, Rajdeep. You're absolutely right that the feel-good factor is significantly missing today. And you rightly said that 25 years we've seen an upward graph of this relationship, no matter, and that's been a bipartisan thing both in India and in the United States. Unfortunately, I think what has happened over the last few months has damaged the relationship, most importantly on the trust front. And all the skeptics who always said that you can't trust the US, you can't, tie your troth to the US and all that, I think they have been proved correct. So I think even if tomorrow Donald Trump was to suddenly take off the 50% and say, oh, I love India and all that sort of thing, I think it will be very difficult for any rational partner, and we are rational partners, to go back to, business as usual. I think trust will take a long time to rebuild, and we haven't even begun.
It's interesting you're saying that trust will take a long time to rebuild. You might have heard Professor Jeffrey Sachs saying this is an opportunity for us to build a stronger trade relationship with China, to have a look-east policy. Now, you've had a huge trust deficit with the Chinese as well. Do you share that view that this is an opportune time to try and strengthen our trade relations with China? The Prime Minister going to Shanghai to China next week, along with President Putin also there. We'll have a new kind of alliance with BRICS is strengthened. Do you go along with that?
Like in human relationships, so also in relationships between countries, one should not go on the rebound. Because if you go simply on the rebound, then you are losing track of your basic interests. So I'm sure that, while we would like to improve relations with China, we cannot lose sight of our fundamental differences with China. So while we are at the moment creating some diplomatic space, we are not going to sort of suddenly become lovey-dovey with China and say, okay, we'll act together against the United States. We still must remember, most recently, we've seen China's operational action on Operation Sindoor along with Pakistan. China remains, our disengagement, our de-escalation has not really been finished. And they're building the most huge hydroelectric project, which is going to, without taking care of the interests of the lower riparian state, that is India. So I think fundamental differences will remain. Whether we can bracket them off and start some amount of normalcy, say, like we are trying to in getting some critical equipment, in getting urea, in getting rare earth magnets, and so on for our industry. Let's see how far that goes. At the moment, it's very initial stages. It's simply talking about direct flights and border checkpoints opening for trade. So let's see how it goes. But I don't think, simply because we're having problems with China, we don't want to go with such a weak negotiating hand to the Chinese.
And let me go back to Professor Latham and Dipanshu Mohan and give them the last word on this special broadcast. Professor Latham, your thoughts. How is this going to pan out in the next few weeks? Do you think there will be a reset, and how tough will that reset be?
I think we always have to look in foreign policy and international relations. We look at not at personalities and not at feelings, but at interests. Where do the various parties' interests lie? Right now, India's interests lie in calming the waters with China, but not with aligning with China. I remind your viewers that since 2017, India has played a spoiler role within the SCO, opposing de-dollarization, opposing the condemnation of Israel, et cetera, et cetera. It has not been on Team China and not been on Team Russia. It has pursued its own national interests, and it will do so again. And I think in the medium to long term, what we're going through now is not a burning of bridges, but a damaging of bridges. And those bridges can be repaired between the US and India. And I think they will be, because the deep, profound geopolitical interests of India and the United States align. And those between India and Russia sort of align sometimes. And those between India and China rarely align.
Okay, so who will play the peacemaker here, Dipanshu Mohan?
Well, I would just say that emotions and nostalgia should not be taken as part of strategy. The time right now is of great volatility and uncertainty. You are going to see this for the next at least 2 to 3 years. US is, with the Trump administration, shooting itself in its foot. There is no doubt that it is seeing what was last seen in the US in the 1970s, an effect of inflation and also a recession. And the US economy clearly will struggle, which will have ramifications all over the globe. We are still linked to the dollar markets. As much as we want to de-dollarize, all of this would take time. But I think one of the critical factors right now is this is clearly India's moment to undertake some serious structural internal reforms, make our industries more competitive. And if we don't do that, our resilience will make ourselves to become more vulnerable to not be able to negotiate in multilateral agreements. My concern right now is that we don't have a lot of leverage. See, Trump acted exactly the same way with China. He came very hard on China. China came back at the Trump administration. The issue is that their imports into the US market are very inelastic. There are not many substitutes. And Trump can afford to take a hardened stand and may continue doing so till just order to ensure more submissiveness. So we are right to exercise restraint, to ensure balance, try restarting relationships with our neighbors. But we are also at a position that we are not having a lot to do in our international markets, whether in South Asia and Southeast Asia. And that to me is concerning.
All right, Dipanshu, really appreciate your time. Professor Latham, Siddharth Zarabi, Geeta and Pranay, thank you for joining us on this special broadcast. Of course, the new tariffs kick in at 9:30 a.m. Indian Standard Time, which is 12:01 EST. And we'll continue to track this story very, very closely with ground reports also from the sectors which have been impacted the most. Stay with us.